Okay, so it seems like we are live. I wonder if I can watch myself in here and create an inception or something like that. Hopefully, if someone can let me know if this thing is working. I guess it is working. Okay, good. So, hi everyone. My name is John Alexis Guerra Gomez. So, I'm going to be doing a very rough example on how to create an application that uses Node.js, Express.js, and hopefully this time I will get the right links, React, and Mongo. So we have a lot of things to cover. So let's start from the scratch. So the first thing is that I'm going to create a new GitHub project, just in case you guys want to follow that. So I'm going to call this Live Node, Express, React, Mongo. So sorry for the stupid name. I'm going to create the repository. Let's see if we can make that work. Then let me put this on Twitter or something, I guess. So you guys can see that link here. Here is the repo we are going to be using. Yes. Okay, so now you have that, so you can actually follow that thing. Let me go and clone this thing so we can start working on that. I have a lot of things running here, so hopefully my machine won't die. So let me git clone that thing. Yes, I have cloned an empty repository. So the first thing we are going to be using, we can start, I'm actually going to start from the backend part, okay? So basically, let me use Express Generator, that it's a piece of software that you can use for generating basic application using Node and Express. And remember that Express is this like very flexible framework that you can use for creating backend applications. So you can install it, as you can see in here, and then you just use it this way. So basically, I'm just going to tell Express Generator to actually create a repository in the same folder that I just created. It's saying that it's not empty, so I'm just going to accept that. And then when I get there, I can do an npm install. And then after that, I can actually start doing testing the application just by doing npm start. So while this thing is loading, I'm actually going to start Sublime in there. As you can see, there are some of the projects I was working on. And as you can see, this is the basic things that that Express Generator is going to give us. So basically, it uses like a template that includes a lot of things, including these routes, where you can actually see the things that are happening on the backend. So actually, these are the templates which we are not really going to be using. So here in the roads is what I intended to show. So here is a very basic road that shows the slash path. And then there is another one that is on users. And you can see that here when it says that it's going to use that folder. Okay, so I'm going to start the project in here. And then when you do that, it's supposed to be running on the port localhost, on the port 3000. So when I go there, you can see the very basic application. What you're seeing in here is being rendered by a template system called POC that you get from the views in here. So actually it's whatever it goes in here, but I'm not going to go into that because we are going to be using React for the front end. So we actually are going to change that in a minute. Before doing that, I'm going to do a couple changes. One of those is that I'm going to start creating an ESLint file in this same folder. So I'm going to run ESLint --- So if you guys don't know ESLint, it's a linter that allows us to write better JavaScript. So I'm going to answer some questions. I'm going to use ES 2015 or ES6. I'm going to use modules, yes. I want browser and Node because I wanted to parse both things. I'm not going to use CommonJS. I am going to use JSX, that is for React. And then if I want to use React, we can say yes, although this part is only going to be the backend. So let's Well, the problem is that this is going to ask me to install a plugin, but let's try. Let's see if it fails, then I'm going to go back. So I'm going to use spaces and double quotes and running on Unix. So I'm going to use semicolons. So when I do that, remember that this file is generated, .eslint.rc. So that one is telling us that we are going to be running on a browser, ESLint, blah, blah, blah. Here are the rules that it is using. I'm going to add a couple rules. Like one of those is that I'm going to be putting a lot of console messages. So I'm going to disable this one. You can read more on the documentation for that. And sorry, I'm going to be rushing because it's a lot of things to cover. So otherwise, we are not going to have enough time for that. The other thing is that I like my indentations to be only two spaces. So that's why I changed that value in there. So coming back to this, we can open this file. And if you are using Sublime, you should have these packages installed to make this thing work. Basically, you need Sublime Linter and Sublime Linter ESLint. Sometimes it could be useful also to have another package for ESLint, but I don't have it in this one. So remember to install those. If you don't know, just go and check for the documentation of Sublime. But it's still not working, and I think that one of the reasons, although this is going to give me trouble with React in a second, but I'm going to try, and if something, I can disable that later. So I'm going to install for development ESLint, and also actually something called Prettier, which is something I just recently learned from React that was going to help us write better code. So actually, I think there's also another thing called ESLint plugin React, which is the one that, remember that thing asked us if we wanted to use React. So since this thing is in here, I think I need to also install it like that. So the only thing is that for some reason, Create React App, that is the framework that we're going to use for generating the React app, it's having conflicts with any other version of ESLint that is not 5.12. So that's why I'm going to set up ESLint to be exactly that same version. And I think even with that, it's going to fail. So it's, of course, telling me that it's not called like that. So let me search for that. Did I spell it wrong? Let's try again. ESLint plug. Yes, I guess I have to learn how to write in English. There we go. So fingers crossed. Remember that you can ask me questions on Twitter. You guys in the class can ask me questions on Slack. I will try to see them, but no guarantees in there. So I got a small time for drinking water while NPM finishes doing that. So if this thing finishes, what we are going to get is that actually Sublime is going to be able to start showing us errors on these files, which right now it's full of errors because it's using single quotes, and I told it that I don't like single quotes. I prefer double quotes. So let's see if this thing has finished. It seems it like it has. And then now if I change something and save the file again, come on, remove this route. We don't need that, so I'm going to remove that thing. The view engine, actually, those things, we are not going to need it, but I'm not going to delete it for the moment because it actually has some other templates, like for instance, this one that is being shown every time you request a resource that is not available. Like for instance, coming back to this, if I go here to John/John or something like that, it should show me, yes, like a 404 saying that the page doesn't exist. And that comes thanks to this, okay? So this is actually telling me that the user's routers is not existing anymore. I'm not really using this variable and things like that. So that's why I love that thing. What else do I need to show you in here? So that is the very basic part of it. I'm also going to delete this file because we don't need it. And finally, this is very important and it's kind of complicated and you guys in class maybe missed this, but I want to be running Express. So we are running right now the backend. Express is running on the port 3000. So if you go in the bin folder, this www file, you can change that to start in the port 3001. And I'm going to tell you in a second why that is important. Okay? So with that, we should have a good to go backend. So it is the very basic one. So we can start working from there. So if we actually see a slash, then we can see the results for that and then just return that. Okay? So now we want to start building the front end. So for building the front end, we're going to do something which is really weird, but this is the way I like to do things. We are going to start using something called Create React App, which is an application or like a bootstrapper, I guess, or code generator or something like that, that helps people starting up with React. So I really like it because it's from the same creators than React. When I started teaching React, it was very complicated because you had to start relying on other people's GitHubs. Oh, by the way, speaking of GitHubs, let me add all of these to the GitHub. So hopefully I will have a, let me make sure that I do have a Git Ignore. No, I don't. So let me create a new file. I'm going to save that as Git Ignore. Yes, whatever. Let me do it. So I'm going to say don't include the node modules. Okay, so remember this folder shouldn't be there. It's a huge folder. It includes all the packages that you have installed from Node. So we don't really need that on Git. Yes, I really screw up in there, so I'm going to Git remove that. Hopefully it didn't get in there. Git status. It's telling me the new files. I'm going to add also these two. And it seems that I might have screwed up with the Git Ignore with the node modules. So although I don't see it in here, so hopefully I'm still in good shape. So adding these two, blah blah blah, and then git commit. I'm going to say adding a basic backend with Express. Let me do a Git push, and then fingers crossed. Let me see if it actually got something. It sent it. Good. And it doesn't seem to have that. I will add the README and everything else later. So now you guys can start working on that. So remember, to run that, the only thing you need to do is clone it, and then you do npm install. And after doing npm install, you do npm start, which is going to start on the port 3001 because we changed that port in here. If you also change the environment variable port, it's also going to change. But for the moment, we changed the default to go in the port 3001. Now, when speaking about Create React App, so Create React App is very similar to Express Generator. It's going to allow us to create a boilerplate to start working with React. And this is going to start getting complicated in a second because of that. So the way of running that is you just use npx. That is something that I'm still struggling to understand, but my best explanation is that allows you to run like a node module or a node package without not even needing to install it or something like that. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to run this, and I'm actually going to generate an app that I'm going to call as simply as front. So this is going to create another project, and this is one of the things that is the most difficult to understand, and is that React is going to have its own project, and that thing is going to be running inside Express. And we are going to be serving that as a static file when we deploy. And we are also going to use a trick that is going to allow us to use the React development server, which is extremely convenient, while still running everything on development. But that's only for development. Okay? So let's see. So this thing, one of the complications with this, and actually this is going to give me trouble for sure, is that the people from React, they want you to use yarn instead of npm. I wonder if using yarn will get me away with the problems with ESLint. So I'm going to see. So basically what I'm doing is that, remember, we have the backend running in here, okay? And every time I go, remember that we had this, not that one, this one here. Every time I request a new resource, you can see that I'm getting requests in here. So one of the things I'm going to do now is that I opened a new terminal here, and I'm actually inside, I mean, my desktop. Here is the project, and now I'm on the front project, which, let me add all of the things in here. commit -m, adding basic React front. Okay, so I'm going to send that and I'm going to push it. So if you guys take a look at that, basically we have this is our folder structure, and then inside the front folder we have a whole new project with its own package JSON. So you can see this is the package JSON of the backend, which is the one on the root folder, and this is the package JSON of the front end that it's on the front folder. Go figure. So this is the one that it might start giving me trouble with the ESLint, so we are going to see. So when we get in there, Create React App will tell you that you need to do yarn install, although they might have done that already. So, and maybe I'm going to screw up things just by doing that. So, and that is going to install the same packages. It's also going to create another node modules folder that you can see here. And then it's also going to get all of the packages required for running React. So remember, we have all of these scripts that we can use: start, build, eject, and test. Do not run eject unless you are done with development, which is going to get rid of all of the both loading of Create React App. Here are all the dependencies for using React, and that is what gets installed when you run npm install or yarn install. So now I'm going to run yarn start, and of course I get the error for ESLint. So here is the thing that I was telling you about. I don't really know how to get rid of this, so the only thing I know of, and this is going to kill me because I really like my ESLint, is that it seems like I cannot have ESLint in here. If someone knows a way of solving this, please let me know, because I still haven't figured out. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to get rid of those dependencies. And then they recommend you in here getting rid of the package lock JSON and the yarn lock. So I'm going to delete those. Package, no, I don't have that. So the yarn lock. And then I'm going to get rid of the node modules. Always be very careful with rm -rf, which is going to delete everything that you pass the parameter to. So I'm going to go back one folder. I'm going to get rid of these ones too. The node modules in the other one too. And then basically in here, I'm going to do an npm install. So it installs it again without the ESLint. And I'm going to do the yarn install in here. I wonder if I should start, let me get rid of that again. And let me try with yarn. So I'm going to do yarn install. And although I already got rid of ESLint, which is what I wanted to have, but whatever. So whatever React says. So I'm going to go into the front, I'm going to do another yarn install, which is going to give me back my node modules folder in any minute. So you guys watch in here, it should appear while it finishes installing the scripts and all of the things on the dependencies. If I have the time, I will try to explain a little bit of the architecture of what's actually happening behind the scenes on Create React App. But I want to start creating something that pieces together all of the elements, so bear with me if I'm running a little bit too much. So as you can see, now it generated the node modules. So I'm running the yarn install. This one in here has finished, so I'm going to do a yarn start, which is the same as npm start. And then that it should give me, since the other one already finished, if I go into port 3000, of course it's not, oh, it's 3001, sorry. Remember, we have the backend running in 3001. And fingers crossed, and yes, we have the backend, okay? So the front end, when we do the yarn start, which is what I'm trying to do here, it's going to start a new web server only for React. And that's something that can really complicate things. And as you can see here, it even will start on my browser. It's quite intrusive, but it's going to start on the port 3000, okay? So that's the reason why I changed the default port of the other application, because otherwise there's going to be a conflict. So it's going to compile things, and once the moment it finishes compiling, it's going to show you the results in here. What is it showing in there? Basically, it's showing whatever we go to the front, the source folder, and then the app component. This component that you see here is the one that is being rendered in there. So if you want to believe me, you just say John was here or whatever. And the nice thing about this is that if I save, actually very quickly, you can see the changes in here. So That's why this is very convenient. However, this is only the front end. So right now we only have the front end on 3000 and we have the back end on the port 3001. And we are going to connect them in a minute. Okay? So let's start creating our component. So, but I also want to have ESLint in here. So it seems like I should generate another ESLint file in here. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do ESLint minus init, same questions. 15 modules, yes. This is only going to be the browser. No. GSX, yes. That is something we need for React. Yes, we need React. We're going to be using spaces, double quote, Unix, semicolons, yes. And JavaScript, yes. So when we finish doing that, then we should have yet another ESLint file. That is this one in here. I'm actually going to change the other one since it's not really, well, it's not really helping me at all, but whatever. So, but in any case, I'm going to be saying that this one is not for the browser. This is the backend one. And I'm also going to be saying that, well, you know what? I'm going to leave it alone just so I don't screw up things. So, but I can go and create another one without the without React. That is what I was trying to get rid of. So I'm going to do the same change, that one, and I'm also going to do another one in here that says no console. Sorry, I think it's no console, and then off. So it will allow me to use console log, which I use a lot for debugging. And finally, if you guys go and search for ESLint, Sublime, ESLint, React, you're going to see that there is a plugin and the things that, is that what I should have searched for? Maybe. Oh no, maybe ESLint plugin React. I think this is the one. So this is the plugin, remember, that we installed on the other one. Yeah. Create React app is installing its own version, and that's why I got the conflict on the other one. So basically, I came here just to see this. So as you can see, I can change the extents configuration. So I recommend you doing that. Remember, this is the ESLint inside the front folder. So I'm going to do that in there. And now this is going to allow me to have the elements for React. I'm actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to comment this out. So I'm going to eliminate this for a moment, and I'm going to show you why it's important to add that line. So I'm going to come back here, I'm going to cross my fingers, save a file in here or something. Then, of course, it's giving me an error, unexpected string, parser options. So let's see on the ESLint file. So, oh yes, I'm missing a comma here. You can also do that by validating this. So it's telling me, well, it's not JavaScript. No, it's not JSON. So whatever, sorry. Anyhow, so the whole idea is that I can now go and save this, and I might get, there we go. So now it's showing me errors. So same thing. I'm going to change commas, quotes, single quotes for double quotes. And now it's telling me that I have an error because I'm including React while I'm not using it. However, that's the way that you use React. You actually are supposed to import React. So that's because ESLint is not including the line that I deleted, which is this one, that are the recommended settings for using the plugin of React. And that's why I went all the way to the plugin to find for that, search for that. So remember, you just search for ESLint plugin React, and on the installation, the documentation, you have the setting in here. You can also change many other things, which I'm not going to get into, but you are feel free to. Okay. Good. So now I have that. I can also start generating things. So let me start, and now I can go and create a change, make a change in here, and start saving this file. And now you can see that it started showing me changes. So let me start from scratch this. So I'm going to get rid of all of the CSS that this thing has. I'm also going to get rid of the CSS of the index file in here. So I'm going to save that and close it. I'm also going to close that and save it, of course. And then I'm going to create a new module. So if that was a little bit too fast, let's do it completely from scratch. So remember, I'm importing React, and then I'm going to be importing the component, or for the moment, let's import only React. So I'm importing that from React, and then I'm going to create a module. Remember that you can create modules in React in many different ways. The most important thing is that this app file needs to create a default export, and remember, you do that like this. We can call it like app. And then the simplest way of doing that on React is creating a function which is going to be returning HTML. I know it's a little bit complicated, but let's say, by the way, I'm going to say that this is the class app. So, and notice how this thing is using class name because the other one is a reserved word. And then I'm going to say, hola, John. I'm going to put that in there. And hopefully I'm just missing this in here. And am I still missing something? App is not defined. Okay, whatever. So let me do it in 2 steps. So I'm going to create a variable, and then I'm going to export default this app. Okay, so hopefully that should be good enough. Yes. So basically, remember this is a function on ES6. So it's a function without parameters, and basically is returning whatever it's in here. Remember that if you include like a curly bracket like that, and actually, well, let me show you that this actually should work. So if I save that file, and then I come here and reload this thing, of course, it's failing. So let me make sure that this thing is running. And then, fingers crossed, you need to cross the fingers for me. That's what happens when you do live coding without practicing. And then you start to have to start making up jokes in the middle of your streaming for filling up the spaces. There we go. So now this thing is working. As you can see, it's actually doing something. Okay? So what I was about to explain is that remember that this is an arrow function. If you don't add anything, whatever it's in here is what gets returned. If you actually add the curly brackets just because you want to add like several lines, like for instance, you want to put in here rendering, which, by the way, this console log is going to appear on the front end. Remember, right now, everything that happens on the front folder, it's on the front end. So those console logs, you're going to see them here on the console of your browser. So you have rendering in there, and then, as you can see, now I need to actually add that return statement in there. Okay? So usually you can put this in parentheses, and this is what's called JSX, which is basically the whole idea that all of the remaining in here is JavaScript, but I'm actually adding some HTML inside that. Okay? So far so good. So let me actually make things a little bit better. So I'm going to change this because I'm going to need to add a lot of stuff to this. So instead of doing that, I'm going to pass this to convert this into a class. And I'm going to say that this extends the component, which is something that comes from React. So actually, you're going to find a lot of tutorials that do it like this. And actually, this one should work. I mean, not anymore a function. So it should be something like this. And this is a class now. So that class is going to have methods. And then you need a method called render, which is the method that is going to return exactly the same thing that we were returning before in the function alone. Okay? So we're returning this. This actually should work. So let me add a couple more of this just to see if it is working from React. So that's why you put that in here like this. Once more. When you do an import like this, it's because you're doing an import of the default element that is being exported in this file. And when you do an import like this, it's because you're importing something like, for instance, I can go and create, I wonder how you do that in one line. So I'm still not sure. So let's say my name export. Let's say that this is a number or whatever. So I can actually export that thing. And the only way I can access that, the only way I can access this is by importing like this app file from there using something like this with curly brackets. I hope this is kind of understandable. It makes sense at all, but if not, please take a look at ES6 and how it works. So we have our basic component. Remember that everything in here is actually started from here. You have this index JavaScript file, which actually have some errors because of stupid single quotes. And then the only thing this thing is doing is that it's importing this index CSS file. It's actually creating a service worker. I leave you as a homework to explore what this thing is. Basically, it's something that allows you to do PWAs or progressive web apps, which is like the new hipster thing. And then, as you can see in here, I'm importing the app from the app file. So actually doing this is the same as doing that, okay? So I'm doing that thing. The other thing I should be doing, speaking of importing, is that I should be importing the CSS file. So I can actually have the CSS for this component. Okay, so now I can actually say here, everything is going to have a font family of sans serif and actually a margin of 20 pixels or whatsoever. Now you can see that it looks a little bit better, you see? So you can keep the CSS for that file in there. So remember, this is the index file. It also contains in the public folder an index.html file, which contains the HTML that is actually getting rendered. So React, it's something that renders after you load the page on your browser. So that's a complicated thing, but as you can see here, it actually does this thing, and then after doing that, it starts rendering the page. We might be able, I wonder if I have a way of putting a breakpoint somewhere which will disable the execution for this. Can I put breakpoints there? Of course not. Well, and then here is something else. But basically, at least this helps me a little bit explaining things. As you can see here, the HTML in the source, in this index file, is actually saying that it should be showing something in here that says, you need to enable JavaScript to run this thing. However, we don't see that thing in there. And the reason for that is that inside this file, which is a bundle.js, which is a file that is being generated by the Create React app, which, if you want to see who is actually generating that, it's a combination of Babel that is transpiling everything we're writing in here that it's on ES6, that is the latest version of, not the latest, but it's a more modern version of ECMAScript or JavaScript. It's transpiling that into a version that it's actually runnable in all the browsers. And then Webpack is packaging all together into a bundle, which you can actually not see here. But you should be able to see here. And then maybe we can put the breakpoint in there. Yes. So when you do that, you see that the HTML is actually empty. And the moment that you start executing this JavaScript is where things start appearing. So actually, all the React things are happening after loading the page. So the first page that gets loaded is this one. So if you want to add libraries on the front end, you need to add them here on the front folder inside the public folder. Also, if you have images, icons, or other things that you want to serve on your page, you put them here on the public. Okay? So to illustrate that, I actually like using Bootstrap. Many people have started like presenting Bootstrap. I still like it. If you go here, I'm actually going to start using it. So I'm going to say, I'm going to include the CSS for Bootstrap, and I'm going to paste it in here in the head of that index file. Okay? So I'm going to do that in here. And then actually immediately you should start seeing like some changes in here, which is Bootstrap and React actually now loading the things on Bootstrap. Then the other thing is that you should know that in Bootstrap, everything should be coming inside a container, a class container. So you can see that in the documentation for Bootstrap. And then as you can see, we have a div in here that has an ID called root. And remember that we had this line in here. Basically what this thing is doing is that it's getting that, okay? It's getting that element. And it's usually using a library called React DOM to render the app module. What is the app module? The one that we have in here. You can see that it has been imported here in this line. It's rendering that inside that root. So the moment that I say in here that the class container, this is the class container, everything I do on React is actually going to be inside. And now you can see that Bootstrap has started doing its magic. So that is even more appearing if I actually remove this margin from here. You should see that it still has a margin that is the margin that Bootstrap usually adds to its stuff. Okay? So now we can start creating our application. So let me know on Twitter or whatever. And actually, we should do a comment for this. So see if I can make this work. Let me make sure that I'm not creating a new file. I'm going to add the front ESLint file and the front Git Ignore file. That yarn log file you should also add. So let me comment this. Basic React component. with Bootstrap. Oh, actually, before sending this, to actually use Bootstrap completely, if you want to use the JavaScript functionalities, you also need to use some JavaScript. So I'm also going to copy this. Remember, that goes into front, public, index HTML. And I like putting that right before the body, because that way it's loading right before after loading the page. So in this case, it might go, I'm not sure if after or before React. Anyhow, so the fact of using this is going to allow us to use collapsibles and all of those things. So just make sure to have that. So I think it's better to include all of that. Let me git commit and then git push, so you guys can follow along. Let me know if there are any questions. Let me check in here. Nothing here. Nothing in here either. Good. Perfect. So where was I? So we have this thing. Let's start creating our component. Okay. So if we go here, we can start creating something basic. Usually you have this return, and then I'm going to start creating the whole application in here. So what I'm going to do is that inside this div, remember that in React, all the components should have like one root element that is usually a div. I'm going to create an h1 in here. I'm going to say like comments. Okay. And then I'm going to create in here what is going to be my comments. Usually we will do this like if we were using Ajax or something like that. And then we will find that element and start building things in there. But instead, we're going to use something else. But for the moment, let's bear with me. So I'm going to say made by John with, and then I actually need to put this inside a span with a role image before React complaints. So so that's for accessibility. We should see that. So now you can see we have a title and then something in there, and the comments should go here in the middle. Okay. So the other thing I'm going to do is that, and I wonder how should I do this? Maybe with a form. So I'm going to create a form, and this thing, it's going to say something like create message. So that has to be something in the backend. So this is actually an URL in the backend that it's going to allow us to create a new comment. Okay, so I'm going to put a new input text. I'm going to call the ID of this like text or comment, whatever. And let's see how this thing is looking here. Here, perfect. Action, when I click enter on this, I actually should be able to do this, and then hit enter, and then you can see it is actually reloading because it's trying to get the create message, which doesn't exist. We want that thing to go to the backend. Okay, so all fingers crossed to make sure that this thing works. So we need to create that element in the backend. So I'm going to do that on an API, as you can see here. So I'm going to create a URL API, and then inside that all the create message and everything else. So now that I have this, I need to actually connect this with the backend. So let's go and create a route in the backend for that. So I'm going to go and exit the front end. I'm going to close all of this just to avoid confusion. Remember that here is the app.js file. Remember that this thing is importing this routes file, and then it's using that in here. So we can go into the routes index file here, and we can either do that here on the API, or what we can do is that since this thing is doing the use, we can put API in here, and then we can start creating different routes in here. So the first one is going to be create message, and then the second one is going to be get messages. Okay, so for this one is rendering a template. We don't want that. We actually want this thing to be sending a message saying like what is happening in there. And actually, I'm a little concerned right now that, well, hopefully it will work. So let's send something in here. Let's just say hola for the moment. And then let's do another one in here that says messages. Actually, you know what? I'm going to send like a file in there that simulates the messages. So for the moment, and those are going to come from Mongo. So let's say here name equals John or whatever, or text John, okay? So now we have that thing. As you can see, I'm missing my ESLint in here already. Am I having an error? Hopefully not. The good news is that now I can go. So remember, we had the backend running in here. So I'm going to stop that and restart it. You can use nodemon or something like that for running that. You can see I'm making a mistake. So I'm line 13. So that one is closing this. So yes, so it should be something more like this. And this one should go here. Let's see if I can actually lint this view. No, it's not really working. Anyhow, or maybe it is, and I don't have any errors. Okay, so the whole thing is that I'm going to restore the backend. And then when I do that, I should be able to go, remember, localhost 3001, which is the backend. If I go there, it should show me nothing. But then the other thing I want is that if I go to the API and I say create message, then it actually should show me something, which is not. And then I'm getting an error in here. So let me try with the other one. So let me just look at API. It's still giving me not found. Or I think the other one is called get messages. Let's make sure that one doesn't work either. So I'm getting an error in here. It's saying API get messages doesn't exist. So I have this one just to be triple sure that I'm doing things right. So let me try this one. That one is working. So most probably I didn't save this file. Could be. So let me restart this. I did that mistake already in class once. So wouldn't be weird for me. Yes. So if I'm doing that again. So API get messages. So now we have an API, and let me turn on the lights so this thing looks a little bit better. Okay, so we have the API in here. We have the get messages endpoint. We should also have the create messages. Create message, maybe. There we go. This one actually should be not a get, but a post. So we change that this way, and then we cannot really get it to the other way. And then what we want is that we want React to be able to access this. So we have two ways of doing that. So I'm going to go back to my front end. I'm going to go here. And then basically what I'm going to do is that on my app component, I'm going to start using one of the methods of the component's lifecycle that it's called component Dismount. Okay? So basically, if you want to see the trick I did, I have something called React snippets installed here. List packages, Babel snippets, this one. And then when I hit CDM, it knows that I want that. And then if I click tab, then it completes. Okay? So basically what I want in here is that I want this thing to be fetching on the API get messages. Okay? And then when I get that, I should be getting some data. And then that data, I'm going to be using the fetch API. The fetch API returns a promise. That promise, the way you should go and read a little bit about how promises work. But basically, whatever you put in here is what it is getting from the results. So I'm going to put this for the moment like this and cross my fingers that this thing is working. So this thing is going to start reloading, refreshing here, as you can see. And then actually want to see got data. And then you can see all the different things that I told you I was going to start writing. So you can see that it's actually trying to get that thing, and it's getting a result, but it's not really the result that we want. So you can see it in here. It is getting a response, but most probably is the one that it's connecting to React. So it's not really what we want. Actually, it might be probably like just this same page as we were seeing before. So how do we connect these things? So the first thing is that I'm going to go back to the console where the front end is running. Remember that I had a yarn starting there running. So, and I'm going to do another command called yarn build. And what yarn build is doing is that it's running Babel to transpile the JavaScript, and then it's running Webpack to cache everything into a folder that is actually the build folder. So when you do that, depending on your configuration, it's going to create certain variables. It recommends you setting the home page config line on the package.json file, and then it's putting everything in there. So if we actually check here, you can see that now I have the folder, and this folder will contain the static version, the compiled version of React, of my app on React. So if you want to make sure that that thing is working, we can go here. Remember, we are in the front, and then I'm going to go into the build folder, and then I'm going to start HTTP server, which is just a regular HTTP server. It's going to run something on the 8082 because I have too many of those opens already. And if I go into 8082, it should show React. The difference is that this one, it's a compiled version, and then you can see that now it's getting a response in here, and it's telling me not found because it's not getting a specific response in that. Okay? So because it couldn't find this URL, you see? So, but now, since I can run that, and this is a static version, this is the way you actually deploy, is that I'm going to tell Express that when it renders the static files, and remember that that is done with this line. This is a line that is doing a configuration, and you can read more about that. Actually, you can see that here a little bit on the static routes here, getting started on static files. It's looking for files on the public folder, so it's actually this public folder, which includes images, JavaScript, style sheets, all of this. So we can get rid of that, because that we are not going to be serving from Express any JavaScript, and I'm closing my fingers that I'm not screwing up things. And then what I'm going to tell it is that your public files are going to be in the front/build folder. Remember, front build is the folder that was created by this yarn build. Where is it? The yarn build that I ran on the front end folder. So it's React compiled. So Express, it's serving React as of now, if it actually works. And one of the things is that you can see that I'm not going to be running the yarn server. So if I go back here into the folder, here, if I go and try to open localhost 3000, it should fail because I don't have a server running in there. As you can see, it's failing, so good. Then this one shouldn't be running either. And then I'm going to restart the backend. So that one is running here. So I'm going to do a yarn start in here. So remember, this is the backend, and that's the one that allows me to run this one, which is failing for some reason. Let me get messages. Here, good. And then create message. Oh yes, remember that I changed that for post, so that's not really working. So the API is working. Express is serving that. You can see that when I request that, it is actually printing that in here. You can even go and start adding console logs just to make sure that this thing is working. Console log get messages or whatever. And then remember, every time you change the backend, you need to restart it. So, or you should start using NodeMon or something like that. So when I rerun that, if I refresh here, if you check the console in here, you don't see any errors. So just something else asking for the fab icon, which I might need to figure out in a second. But then here on the terminal, I got a error. Here we go. So, oh yes, it seems it's like the other one is because it's requesting the fab icon, I'm guessing. Yes, the fab icon. Here it is. So, but you can see it's telling me this message. So, console logs on the backend goes into the terminal. Console logs in the front end in React goes into the console on the browser. So, one thing executes in the browser, the other thing executes on the server. Okay? So, having done that, the only thing I'm missing is testing if this thing is working. And the way of testing that is requesting something on the root URL. So if I do this and crossing my fingers, of course I get a not found error. It's still asking for this stupid one. Am I missing something? I wonder if it got, let me check if there's something else that it's asking for public. This one, it's in here, and it's checking front slash build. Let me try with this, maybe, I don't know. Join start, then rerun that. Oh, was it that? Interesting. The whole thing is that now React is being served directly as a bundle by Express, because that's the compiled version of React. So as you can see now, here it's telling me that it got data, and it's actually requesting API get messages from this same area, which it should get it like the actual results that we want. And we are going to be using those in a second. So once more, Express is serving as static files at React. And those files are in the yarn build folder, okay? And that, in the front build, which was generated by the yarn build command, okay? So you can see that all the requests in here, even the 5 icon is not failing anymore because even that, it's coming from React, okay? So you can see that in here. Good. So let me make another commit in here, connecting, or rather serving React from Express, okay? So, and let me do a Git push. So as of now, if you get this project, you will need to just go into the backend and into the front end and run yarn install and yarn build. And then on the backend, you just do yarn install and yarn start. And only on the forum 3001 you can get the results. Now, problem. You could work this way, but actually this is a very bad idea, because if you go, remember that I could change things in here and then I could say works. And then when I change that thing, if I save that thing, you should see the result in here immediately. Well, actually, it doesn't really work. I save that, I can refresh here, and it's my server is not running, blah, blah. Let me run that. I'm running the backend. You can see that I'm running that here on the backend. So I'm running the backend, I'm reloading this page, and it's still not showing that new header that I just put in there. How do I get that to work? So you have to go, remember, I'm going to go back here. I'm in the front end now, yes? And then I need to actually do another yarn build. And when you do that, which can take a lot of time depending on the speed of your computer, because Babel and Webpack, it take a lot of time. Actually, it wasn't that bad. But it's still, you still have to go and rerun that and then refresh this. And then you will see the result. But we still want to be able to do the development like very quickly without having to have that failing in there. So what I'm going to do is that we can do that, we can achieve that using another trick. And it's that we can run the two servers simultaneously. We can run the server on the back end and we can run the server on the front end. And we can tell the server on the front end that it needs to use a proxy to the server on the back end. So how do we do that? You go and modify the package.json on the front end. So on the front folder, we open the package.json, is the one that has the React thingies, not this one that is the backend one. No, it's the front end one, the one that has that. And then you add a new line that says proxy, and then the proxy is going to be HTTP, localhost, and guess what? Port 3001. And the 3001 means that it's actually connecting to the backend. So when you do that, and hopefully you save, and not like the way I did on class last time that I didn't save and didn't work, then I can start the yarn server, the front-end server, and then that is going to launch my application again, the front-end, the front-end development server on the port 3000. You need to make sure that your backend is still working. And then here is the nice thing. So the backend is still working. You can see it in here. And then let me add a couple enters here so you can see the change. If I refresh this, you can see that now it's connecting to the backend. It's saying in here that it's connecting to the 3000, but because of that proxy line that we added, is actually redirecting that to the backend. And the reason why it's redirecting is because there's no routes on React that serve get messages, API get messages. So because of that, it's going to the backend, and we should be getting the results. So now, the other thing I want to show you is that now if I come in here and then I start making a change, make a change in the world, blah, 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 and I save that, if you see here, immediately starts showing that. While if you go and show that here on the backend, and I refresh this, you can see that it's still on the old version. And it's only going to change the moment you do the yarn build. So remember, two ways of running this. One way is compiling and running that, compiling React, putting that into the build folder, which is doing with the yarn build, and then make it serving everything from Express on the backend. Or the other way, it's running the backend and then serving the front end from the development server, and then doing a proxy such that you can actually do the fast development that we have been doing. So this has to be very confusing. The only way you learn this is by doing it yourself. So make sure to actually replicate all of these steps. And for that, let me see what is the status of this. Yes, what? Didn't I add that file? Yarn log git status. There we go. So I'm going to commit this, adding a proxy to React. And then we can do a git push. So when we do that, you should be able to run that. You need to do npm install and npm start on the backend. You need to do yarn install and yarn build on the front end and yarn start. And when you do that on the port 3000, it's going to be running React. And in the port 3001, it's going to be running Node Express. And the two are going to be talking together in a beautiful world where everything should work. So now we can start making something with these messages. So what I'm going to do with that is that I always forget about this, but I think is the way of using fetch with JSON is returning this. And then that is going to transform the body or the payload that was coming inside, supposing that it's a JSON file, and it's going to return that on this function. This is an arrow function. And then in here, I'm actually going to get my data that is being like transpiled. So another way of explaining this is like this, although yeah, it won't really work because it returns another promise. So yeah, I need to do it this way. So basically what I'm doing in here is that this one receives the whole request, and then it tries to send the content as a JSON, and I might have an error in there. I'm going to check in a second. And then in here, I'm only going to get the actual data. So I'm going to put that data in here, and I'm going to see what this thing is doing. So as you can see, I have an error. Console is not a function. Oh, yes, of course. Nobody told me. Shame on you. So here you got data, and you actually got that data that says John. So it's actually working. So that's the thing that couldn't make work last time. Okay? So with that, what the next thing we want to do is to start rendering that thing here on the, remember that we had a div that was doing that? So I'm actually going to remove this, and I'm going to put that in here on something that says render comments. And what render comments should do is that it's a function, render comments. This function should be returning whatever comes into the props of this application into the comments props. So remember, the props are all the variables that the component is receiving from the outside, and since this one is not really receiving, it's a state. And the state is the attributes that are saved as the state of this component. So the state are the values that are inside the component, or the values that are required for that component or its children. And props are the elements that are going to come from behind, from another component. So I'm going to say that all of these comments, I'm going to do a mapping function. So another way of doing this is that I can do this the ugly way. So I'm going to create a list in here. And then I'm going to use something that is actually new in ES6, that it's let see off comments, which this is going to be a list. So to make sure that that's a list, I'm going to initialize that here in the constructor. I'm going to create a constructor, typical constructor of React, which it's going to receive the props. It's going to pass that to the constructor of the component. That's what this line does. And then it sets up the default value for the state, which is an object. And then that object is going to have an attribute that are the comments. So I'm going to initialize that as an empty thing, okay? And then I'm actually going to do this. And finally, I'm going to iterate this, and then I'm going to push on inside this thing a basic div that prints a comment, okay? Or actually, right away, I'm going to be printing c.text, okay? So when I do that, then I can actually return this res. So if, depending on how many elements you have in here, let's to make this super clear, let's start doing like this. So I'm going to create another one in here that says comments, and this is an array. And in that array, I'm going to create a couple of these, and those ones are going to have some text that says comment, and then 1 and 2, okay? And you can see how useful ESLint is. So basically, I'm iterating through that, and for each comment, I'm appending into this list this thing in here. We can actually, I wonder what this thing is going to print. Console log res, which is going to be a list, and then I'm going to return that. And this render comments function then, which I'm calling here, is going to be replaced by a list of divs that includes the comments or the text. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. And then as you can see in here, it is actually creating all those comments. Make sense? So if you inspect this, if you right click and inspect that, then you can see that I have a comment and then another comment, okay? And it's being generated by this. So this is the ugly way of doing that. So we can start making this a little bit less ugly by saying that instead of having a local variable, what I'm going to use is the variable that I initialize in the constructor, remember? That it's inside the state. So that is the state of the component. And the nice thing about this is that every time we change that state, it's going to be re-rendering the component. So when I do that, now it doesn't render anything because it initially doesn't have anything. But then if I go and say in here, other or whatever, it should start with that other. Make sense? Okay. So, but we want this to start empty. So we're starting that empty. And then the next thing I'm going to do, and this is the trick, is that I'm going to put another instruction in here. Since it's more than one instruction, I need the curly brackets, and then you can see that in there. And then basically what I'm going to do is change the state. For changing the state, you don't do a modification directly of the state. What you do is use a function called setState. And then on that function, you can set up what are the new comments that you want to have. And basically what I want is that my comments be the data that I got from this API message. So when I do that, and all my fingers are crossed, then you can see, and I don't know if you managed to notice, but it actually started empty because it rendered the initial value, and then it went and connected, and when it connected and got the results, it actually rendered the John in there. So it's doing that very quickly now. So, but we can still see that happening if we put a breakpoint in the, and by the way, there is a React extension for Chrome that I recommend you using that are going to help you understand that better. So when you have that thing running, and I might not have it working. Let's see here. Yes, it's still using the bundle. So this might be a good opportunity for installing that React component. Here it is. It's actually disabled. this page is using the development, blah, 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 because I want to be able to see. Let me see if I can get access to that. Here it is. So in this Webpack internal folder, can you see that? I can actually see my app. And the nice thing is that I can even put breakpoints in there. So if I render this, you can see it renders the whole component. It doesn't have any comments. And then it's doing the fetch. And then I can put a breakpoint in here and say, continue execution of this. I'm going to do that in here with this one. No, that one, no, this one, yes. And then it's going to, it got the new data. Then when it does the new data, where is my F10 in here? Here. It's going to do the set state, and when it does the set state, it's actually going to render another time the component. So if I run this once more, then you see that now it's going to render the new component, and in this case, it's going to have the new state, and because it has the new state, it's going to render this. So that is apparent when you see here the console. You should see that we are doing two renderings. So, and remember that I was printing console log render here on the render function. So the first render is when it does the first rendering, and then the component Dismount method kicks in, goes for the data, it gets the data, and it sets the state, and when it sets the state, it asks for re-rendering. Because of that, you should never do this set state in here, because if you do that, you're going to get an infinite loop. Make sense? Because it changes the state, which causes a new render, and it will keep on doing that. And I think React is not smart enough for catching that problem. I'm getting an error in here because it's saying that I'm not adding a key property, which we need in here. So I'm actually going to put that like this. And then I can actually have that as a variable like this, and then just do like the typical C++ thing. Okay, so for all of those of you coming from Java, this should be way simpler to understand, but we are not going to do things that way. So what? Oh, by the way, remember that I was asking what it was rendering. So I think it might be this one. What is the other one? So yeah, it's not printing very clearly. Anyhow, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to delete this, and then I'm going to write it again, but the JavaScript way. So one way of doing this is that instead of doing that, I'm going to do a return of this state comments. That's a list, therefore has a method called map, which receives a function, an accessor, that whatever you return in there, it's going to transform the list depending on what you pass in there. So I'm going to pass a function. That function is going to have my comment and the index. The second element is always going to be the index. And then it's going to do a render of this same thing in here. So let me do that in there. And then I can actually get rid of all of this, and that thing in there is doing exactly the same thing than the other one. And this is very common in tutorials that you're going to find for React. And if you see, it's actually working. So far, so good. Okay? So once more, this is a list, and then it's changing that list depending on whatever you return in here. So I'm receiving the comment, and I'm returning this because I'm not adding the curly brackets. This is exactly the same that doing this. Remember that? Okay? So, but since I'm only having one instruction and that's what I'm returning, it actually counts to do it this way. Okay? All right. So continuing with React, the next thing I should do is that I should create a comments component. So instead of doing this, I want to have a comment and then pass not only the text, but actually the full comment C here. And if you are asking why am I using curly brackets in here, remember, this is JSX, or is HTML inside that. And then I'm putting it's like having HTML inside JavaScript. So the moment you start doing this, it becomes HTML. And then if I put this like this, then it's going to search for an element C inside there. Whereas if you use the curly brackets, it's saying I'm going to include the JavaScript element, and that's what's actually saying for looking for that. Now, I have an error that it's telling me that I haven't created that. So I'm going to create that component. I'm going to import comment from comment.js. You might want to add like a different folder for this. So what I'm going to do is a new file in here. I'm going to save that as comment.js. I'm going to create a new component using another snippet. That is that one. This should be doing a default export default. And then what I'm going to put in there, it's something very similar to what we had before, is that I'm going to have, this is the class name comment, in case you want to add some CSS for that. And then inside there, I'm going to create a div that includes the c.text. And then I'm going to have a button of the class button and the class button secondary or info that it's less colorful in Bootstrap. And then I'm going to say in here span with the role image because I'm going to add an emoji. And then that emoji, it's going to be like thumbs up. There we go. So I'm going to add that thing in there. And finally, the other thing, it's like for the moment, I'm going to do this. This C doesn't exist, so actually that's coming from the props. So now it's telling me that I'm going to fix that in a second. But basically, this is a parameter, and actually that is going to come from a parameter called comment, which is what I'm passing in here. So when I say, here is my comment, and by the way, let me select all and call and run GS Predator in there. And then that's the other thing I installed, and it's very helpful because it allows you to tidy up your code, and is recommended by the same people of React. So you should be able to see that button in there. I'm actually going to put this the other way around. I'm going to put another div in here, maybe, or a span, I don't know, that says how many votes this thing has. So it's going to be like something like this. And then I'm going to create a constructor in here that has my props, and that's going to have the same thing. And I'm going to initialize that with votes. And that thing is going to start at 0. Okay? So for the moment, I'm just going to have that, and this is going to be a button, and we are going to add elements in a minute. Let's add prettier, and that actually you can see that it organized things like this, which looks significantly better, I want to say. So now if I render that, you can see I have only one comment, and it's showing that thing in here. Instead of using divs for this one, I'm going to use just a span, so it doesn't go into the next line, and then you can see the extra space in there. I might need to, how do you do that? NBSP, I think is what it's called. So you should be doing that on CSS, just whatever, who cares? So let me add that. So now I have that thing. It has a button. If I add more comments, it should show up in there. So in a moment, I'm going to do something that when I click on this, it actually increases that element in there. Okay. So what else? Let me turn the other lights because now it's too dark here. Fine, so since we are in this part, then you guys should know this, but one of the things I can do is that I can say on click in here, and I can pass what is the event handler for this. So remember that when I do that, the whole idea is that this on click function, which is a function that I'm going to put in here, this on click function, what it needs to do is that it needs to set the state, okay? And on that state, I'm going to increase the votes, and basically I'm just going to take whatever value was on votes, and I'm going to add 1 to that. So I recommend you taking a look at, and I was missing the curly brackets because that's an object. So I recommend you taking a look at the documentation on React. The way I'm doing things in here might not be the best way because you need to make sure that it's a new object, blah, blah, blah. So, but I don't have time to go into that. So the nice thing is that when I do that, I'm going to change the state. And when it changes the state, it's going to re-render this. However, I have an error. And is that when I try to do this, and hopefully it will fail. So let's see if it fails. Didn't I do that? And have an accessible, oh, of course. So area label, something like this, like boat for this comment. So it's complaining about accessibility. Then I'm going to put in here heart emoji. Can I get rid of the, yes, I still have one. Where is that? Ooh, in the comments. Didn't I save comments? Do I have that mistake all the time? Yes, good. So now if I click on this, then you see an error. And the error is saying that set state, you cannot get set state of undefined. And that it's on this line in here is where I'm doing the set state. So you wonder, why is this thing failing? Well, it's failing because you haven't bind this function to this object, which is a function of the class. That doesn't make any sense if you come from Java or something like that. It might make a little sense if you come from Python because you have always to include the self in all the methods. I don't really have a good way of explaining this, but the whole idea is that when you do this, you're telling this function to know that the this object on that function should be the same this object on this function, which is the same element that in here. So if you do that, and you recommend, and then you run that, then you can see that now it starts increasing, okay? And that is something that it's on the component and is not persistent, but it will only stay in there. So it's only changing for the moment in there. It's temporary, okay? So you might need to change that in the backend later, but I don't have time for that. So for the moment, let's leave it like that, okay? So you can do that this way. And let me do a comment in here. I might need to add that file. Front source component. Comment, sorry. Let me see if I'm good. Good. Git commit. Adding a comment file component. Okay, let me do a Git push so you guys should see the changes now. What else? So now I have that. The other way of running this, like actually might be the way recommended by React, is doing something like this. You say onClick equals the same method, but binding the this. So basically, it's either way. Okay. So so far so good. I don't need that anymore. Make sure not to use this like this. Okay, because that's going to be a problem. Now, I also have an error in here. Maybe you guys didn't notice, but this thing has been really giving me the creeps. So it is telling me that it's missing the proper props validation. And that's the nice thing about using ESLint with the plugin of React. What that means is that I have my component, and in React, the standard says that you should take your component, you should establish an attribute called prop types, which is an object that contains attributes that should be of the type prop types and whatever value that you have. In this case, I think it's object, and I'm going to say this one is required. See, if it is not required, you just don't add that. Now I have another error that it's saying that this thing doesn't exist, and it's because I haven't included, and you need to include that. So you should import this from another package called prop types. I wonder if that one got included in here. It is not. And now I wonder if I should add it manually. I'm going to do it just for the sake of it. It should work anyhow, but let's try that. So I'm going to append that yarn add prop types, which is a separate package. Before it used to be part of the React distribution, but now it works as a separate package. All right, so I have that one in there, so it's included. Did I save this file? So So I close this, let me save that, let me rerun that, and now I don't have any warnings, okay? So now I have the component, and now I want to actually be loading that from the backend. So if I'm actually doing that from the backend now, but I want to be doing that from Mongo. So as of now, if I go in here, remember that we're doing this. So so let's say nose React or whatever, or not really, or whatever. So I'm returning just a static object in here. So if I want to change that, I need to restart my backend. Always make sure to do that. So I'm going to restart my backend. And then I'm going to refresh this. And then you can see that now it's rendering the 3 elements. Okay? Now, so now I want to do that from Mongo. So that's the third step, the third wheel. So for doing that, the first thing I need to do is I'm going to stop this. I'm going to add MongoDB. So yarn add is the same thing that npm install --save. So I'm going to add the plugin for MongoDB, which is the library we are going to use to connect to Mongo. So if you guys search for MongoDB node, then you're going to find the driver. This is the official driver from them, and usually what I do is that you can check on the documentation, and then here is a quick start on how to start using this thing. Let's see if I can actually run that directly on my own, and I actually made a mess here. Hopefully, I need to clean this. Bear with me for a second. Someone tell a joke, please. Whatever, let's clean it with this. So let's start doing that. So the whole idea is that in the backend, that is, we're here in the backend, what the first thing we need to do is that we need to import the Mongo client. So Mongo client basically requires MongoDB, that is the package that we just installed, and inside that there is another package called Mongo client. Okay, so, and by the way, we are using the older version of JavaScript in here, but whatever. So the next thing is that you can create an URL, which is usually something like this that says MongoDB is like an HTTP but for the Mongo protocol. Then it's connecting to the localhost 27017, which is the default port for Mongo. And that means that we need to have Mongo running. So I'm going to make sure of that in a second. And then, if I'm not mistaken, I need to do something like connect to this URL. And then, oh no, it's actually using something very different. So basically, it creates a new object of this. Okay? And then it saves that in a connection on a client. And then finally, after doing that, I can do a client connect, which doesn't receive any parameters. Good. And then this is going to receive a function that I can do with an arrow function, as we have been doing. Or you can do with that with functions if you want. Maybe let's do that way so we guarantee that it doesn't fail. There is a big difference between arrow functions and regular functions, and is that the arrow functions don't really set up the this object. So the same thing we were having issues with React, it's same thing in here. So I'm going to connect, and then the first thing I need to check is that this error is different, or if this error equals null, means that there was an error connected. So I should be raising an error, and that should be showing me something. And if not, I can print in here something like connected. Okay? And then I'm going to check for the database. So I'm going to start the backend once more. And then, of course, I have an error. Unexpected identifier. What the heck? Oh, yes, sorry. I'm missing combining Python and JavaScript. So actually, I need to throw an exception with whatever error I get from there. That's good. And it's actually telling me that the command failed. So because Mongo is actually not running. So I'm going to go and start MongoDB. So I do that with MongoD. I already have that installed. And of course, give me an error. So let me make sure that actually Mongo is running. So Mongo is running. So I have a different error command fail with code equals done. I always make this mistake. Let's try it like this way, maybe. Let's see what the heck we are getting there in that thing. And then rerun this. And as you can see, it is actually null. So I wonder, oh yes, it's the opposite. So actually it should be different than null. So if error is different than null, then we throw an error. If not, then it should work perfect. So we are connected. And finally, once you have done that, we can create a database connection, which is client and database, maybe. So we are going to create another one that is called comments. So for this, I'm going to start Mongo Compass. That is an application I recommend you downloading. It's a very nice front end for Mongo. You can use that for exploring Mongo if you're new to it, or if you're lazy like me. Or the other way is just connecting with the regular client, which is what I was doing here when I wanted to make sure if it was working. So I'm actually connected in there, you can see, with Mongo. And then I can say what are my databases. I don't have anyone that it's called comments, so I'm going to create one with that in a minute. So I'm actually going to create a database in here that is called comments, and a new collection that it's called comment. Okay, or comments, not sure. So let's put it in here, DB comments, just to make sure that it's different. And then I'm going to put another collection called comments. That is like the table. So now I can go into DB comments, and I have these comments in here, and that's the one that we are going to be querying. So coming back to this, so I want to connect to this, and then if we are connected, then we can actually do client close, I think it is what it is saying there. Yes, so with this DB is the one that we are going to be using for querying things. So once we have done that, the next thing I need to do is to get a collection, and we do that like this. So we can get that with something like this. So I'm going to do my comments, db.collection, then comments. So with that one, I can actually start doing queries, for instance. So what I'm going to do in there is that, by the way, I might want to do something different. Okay, anyhow, so what I'm going to do in here is that I want to do comments and then find, and we're going to search all the possible comments that exist in there. I'm going to limit that to only 100 comments or something, just so it doesn't overflow my front end. And then I'm going to convert that to an array. And when I convert that into an array, this is going to get me another function, which, if I'm not mistaken, takes two parameters, that it's error2, and just making sure that it's a different one from the one on top, because this one still exists, and then my documents, that in this case are going to be my comments. Okay, so, and then if I do that, then I can say console log in here, got, and then plus docs comments. So this should be a list, so length. And finally, I also need to check in here that error, if error it's different than null, means that there was an error, then we should also throw it. We should manage this better, but for the moment it's okay. So I'm going to leave the connected in there, but it's very important that we put the close in here. Otherwise, it's going to close before running this thing. So it's very important that we put that inside. So since I have changed the backend, we need to change that in here. Maybe? Yes, that run that again. Client database is not a function, so DB name might be what I'm looking for. Client DB only. So it's something like this. Let me run that once more. It got 0 comments because it doesn't have any. And actually, you can see that all of this is being executed right away because I didn't include that in there. So what I'm going to do now is to insert a new document, and then I'm going to put a parameter that says text, and I'm going to say John. Guess what? So I'm going to put that in there. When I restart this, now you can see that now we got one comment. Okay, so now we want to return that in the backend, So one way of doing that is putting this inside a function that it says get comments. And then we can put all of these in there. Okay? So this is one way of doing things. We are going to change that in a second. And then the thing is that, as you can see, we have a little bit of a callback hell in here. I should have done this with a promise or something, but I don't want to confuse you, and I don't know that well to do it on the top of my head. Anyhow, the whole idea is that I'm running this function. When I run that function, it's starting this, then it's connecting, which goes me into another function that gives me the DB that I use to get the database, and then the collection, and then from the collection I get into yet another function. So it's like a third level of inception, and then here I have my documents. So the way of accessing that is that I can pass a callback in here, yet another callback. And then on that callback, I can send my documents. So that has to be very difficult to understand if you're coming from non-asynchronous language like this one. But so if you do, then you have to make sure to practice that and try to understand the callbacks a little bit better. The whole idea is that now I can get my messages, and those messages are going to take as a parameter a function that takes my docs, and then it's sending inside this thing. So basically, I'm going to say got the messages in here, okay? But actually, let's leave that in here so you can see the request. And then it's going to call this function that is going to do the triple functions. And then when it gets the data in here, it's going to call this callback, which is none other than this one here, which is a very simple callback that the only thing it's doing is asking for sending these documents in here. Okay, so let's cross fingers and then run this in here. And then when I do that, you can see that now it's not saying get comments, but it's getting that, it's going to get that the moment I run localhost 3001, because this is the backend API get messages. So when I do that, of course I get a message. An error saying that I don't have get messages because it's called get comments, of course. Get comments, and I miss my ESLint in here. And I need to find a way of fixing that, but not for this video. So let me refresh that, and now you can see that it's returning one comment. So if I include more in here, so if I go and include another one in here, you have to make sure that it's the same format. So I'm going to do other, then I have two of these. And then when I refresh this, now it's getting me the two. And then the nice thing is that if I have still my local host running the front end, now you can see that I have two. And then if I insert another one, let's go with a third one. So when I do that, if you refresh in here, you actually get to see the element, because this is coming from the backend. So Mongo has the data. Node is getting that, React is requesting the data from the /API/get messages endpoint. It's going to Node, to Mongo, and it's getting the result, and then it's returning that result inside this function in here, okay? So let me try to make work this one in here. So remember we had this create message. So let's see if we can get that one to work. So what I'm going to say in there is that I'm going to say create message, and then I'm going to print in there the request and the params that comes in that request. So the whole idea in here, let's see if I can get that one to work. I'm going to restart this, and then on the front end, you guys remember, so let me close the back end, let me go to the front end. Remember that we had this input here, we have this input, and then it was saying that it was sending this create message. And I think this needs to do something like this, most probably, let's see, because I'm going to post data so it actually can get printed. So it's not going to go into the regular way. So I'm going to put that in here, and then I'm going to go in here, and then let me show this thing so you can show something. New one, and then I click on that, and then that one send create message, invalid status code, create message. What the heck? I wonder, deprecated, send status body, use. Oh, really? Wow. It might be. it might be because I'm sending also a message in there. So yes. I wanted to do something completely different in here. So I wanted to do this, a console log. So for the moment, and then we can see what we are going to return in there in a minute. So I'm going to do this once more, and then we have that, and then we're going to send something, hit enter, and then you can see that we got a create message, and it's at least launching the event. Now I need to be able to get that A from there. So I'm going to search for Node Express post. It might be this one. URL parameters, post parameters, request, body, variable name. So let's see if we can get that in there. So it should be in something like here. Did we say name? No, we say we have an ID, but I think what we want is the name of this. So let me put it like that. And in any case, let me print the body, the full body, just to see what it gets. And let me start this once more. Oh, sorry, not that one, this one. And then I'm going to send another one. And then you can see that it has an attribute called A. So we can actually get that from there. So what I'm going to do with this is that I want to create a new one. So I want to create a comment. And that comment should have this object, that it's a new text, that it's going to be the request, how is it called? Comment. So comment. Actually, we should call it text, just to be a standard. So just to make sure we put it like here. So, and then we can restart that. So this function doesn't exist anymore. And then we actually can send, press send. I think I saw a message up here that was explaining us exactly what we needed to do. That was the body something. Anyhow, so we can take a look at that in a minute. So just to make sure that we send a message saying that everything went okay. So in any case, let's create this function. So for creating that function, we can do one of two things. So we can just go and say create comment in here. And then that create comment, we could do exactly the same thing, and we can copy and paste all of this. But it's going to be a lot of repeated code. So I'm actually going to try, let's see if I can make it work, here. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create another function that is going to be called connect. And that one is the one that is going to be doing this. So all the way to here, we should be good to go. And the only thing extra is that we are inside this thing. Here is where we have the comments and this DB that we actually need, or the client that we needed to close it. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to pass the, so I need to call, receive another callback in here. And I'm going to call this callback, okay? And inside that callback, I am going to pass the comments and the client, okay? So the way of doing that is that now I can call connect database. And then this one is going to have a function that is going to be my comments and my client. And then I put this part in here inside that one. I don't know if that makes any sense. But basically, what I'm going to do is that this one in here is where I'm taking these parameters that I actually got from this, and I need to pass the client because otherwise I cannot close the connection. And then inside that one, I do these comments find, and then I can actually close the elements like this. So I'm going to put the connected in here, and I have my get comments in here. And finally, and I'm not sure if this is the cleanest way of doing this, but I'm doing this on the fly. So like something that you might want to check are the new async and promises, which could be a cleaner way of doing this. But the nicest thing is that now I can also do a connecting here. I can also pass comments and client. And then on this one, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to do comments insert. And this one is going to receive what is the actual object that I want to insert. So I'm going to receive this. I'm going just to call it C. And then I'm just going to insert this comment in here. Let me make sure that that's the way you do that. So here, insert a document. So you actually do insert many if you want to insert many, or in this case, we want to insert one. Okay. And then you pass what is the object, and then you pass the second parameter. It's a function that is going to tell us if we had an error. So in this case, is getting error and a result. Why it has a result? Well, I don't think I really need that result. So basically, I'm only going to do if error is not null, then we have an error, and then we should be throwing that error. Although in the callback we should be putting something else. And we can actually do just a console log in here that says inserted. Okay, so not sure if this thing is going to work. Is lint, it's it, easy as lint working for me here. Lint, this view, yeah, here's lint is not working. So let's run it just to see if it shows me an error. Then I'm going to close this. I'm going to reload that. Then, of course, it's showing me error is not defined. In this throw error, in delete connection, in the index in line 29. Line 29 is this one in here. So it's this one here, error, and throw error. Yes, of course, that was the problem in there, and this one should be fine. So actually we can get rid of this because now we don't have the other one. So that one should work. Run that again, and then restart this. So far so good. And then I can do A, and then it says it inserted, and then if I refresh, it actually shows that in there. So the final thing I'm missing is that I want this thing to actually update and show me the result immediately. So I wonder how should I do that? I guess like one way of doing that that occurs to me right now is that we can put all of this inside a reload function. So reload data. And then we can have a reload data here that just does the fetch. And since I know I need to get the new fetch the moment I add a new comment, so, and that it's happening here, that's the thing, that one is not really. So I wonder, what if I redirect? So that might be the case. So let's see, node express redirect. Redirect to URL. Basic redirect routing, maybe. Let's try this one just to see what it says. Res redirect. So let's try this one. So what I'm going to do is that the moment the things get inserted, I'm going to redirect to slash. Not sure if that's exactly what I want, but whatever. So let's try that. I'm going to do this. Where is my application? Here. Works. Kind of. So it's redirecting, it's reloading the whole thing. I wonder if there is another way of doing this, that after the post, because it's still having to wait, but it will be nicer if I don't have to actually wait once more. So maybe one way of doing that, it's this. Yeah, that might work. So, oh, but what about the post? Yeah, I guess I will have to miss that one. I will commit if I find a cleaner solution, but I'm too tired now. So let me see how we are in this. If you have any questions, you have like 2 minutes to ask them to me on Git and Twitter or something so I can answer before I sign off. And if not, well, thank you very much. And I will see you in the next video. Meanwhile, I will be commenting out, will be pushing my final code in here. Yeah, thank you very much. See you. Let me stop this.